Welcome to the FinalDotFinal podcast, where we go behind the scenes of the game industry through conversations with the artists and developers who bring it to life. I'm your host, Michael Pasker, an artist, lifelong gamer, and industry veteran. And today I'm joined by Nat Dart, a talented UI UX developer in the game industry. Hey Nat,
Hey,
what's
hello.
going on?
Hey.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get started in games, or
Yeah.
where did you get started in the whole art world?
Well, I was at school for 3D animation in Vancouver at Emily Carr, and it was 2006. I was like partway through school, and I took a part-time job in games.
Do you remember
And
what
this was a
studio?
super small.
Super small.
Yeah, it's called Magmic Games, and
Mm-hmm.
very small company, and we were doing BlackBerry games,
Oh, wow.
think like card games and solitaire and kind of like poker games, stuff like that.
And
It
what
was a
was your
perfect
role
place for
in
me
that
to
whole
uh, artist, just
just artist?
generalist artist. Yeah.
Cool.
So any of the art needs that they had on the games, I would just do that. And I worked with all engineers. It didn't pay a lot, but it was the perfect part-time job to be doing after school, even in the middle of the day when I didn't have class because it was just off Granville Island where I went to
Mm-hmm.
school.
From there, you just moved to other companies and kind of grew your career in that way.
When I started, I was just a generalist, so any of the art needs they had in the game, I did. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I graduated from university, a friend reached out from Disney, which was also in Vancouver, and that was for a UI artist job. So that was the first time I had heard of that role specifically on a team. And I got the job, took it, and worked on a Pirates of the Caribbean game for a year. And that's when I really kind of dug into doing UI work for a
Mm-hmm.
AAA game for the first time. So it was a great experience.
So, what kind of UI work was it? Like implementing UX or iconography? What parts were you?
At that time, there was not a real definition of UX in video games. The whole process was handled by the artist. So we kind of incorporated the UX step into doing the UI art mockups. It was all kind of done at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I got a little bit of a taste for doing AAA games, and I knew, like, coming from mobile, that I was more interested in working in that medium. And so I had an opportunity to work at Telltale Games, and I moved
Mm-hmm.
down to the United States. Uh, and that was, a huge change for me to immigrate and do that whole process. But it was awesome too. At the same time, I got to work on some incredible games with Telltale, like The
Mm-hmm.
Walking Dead, which
Oh,
ended up
that's cool.
being another great experience. Like I really kind of leveled up my UI game with that.
Mm-hmm. And uh, to create some of those ideas, what were some of your processes like?
At that time in my career, I think I had a large emphasis on the visual aspect of UI, more
Mm.
so than the usability. So I approached it with a lot of traditional art making skills and practices. Like I would be very focused on doing a lot of the texture work. So
Mm-hmm.
like for The Walking Dead, it was a lot of sort of butcher paper and newsprint
Yeah.
textures everywhere and blood splatters and looked really grungy and stuff because I was very motivated to create beautiful, creepy
Yeah.
textures at that time. Um, and also coming from Pirates of the Caribbean with its use of paper textures everywhere and scrolls, I had this understanding of just how to do like paper looking UI. So
Mm-hmm.
I had such a cool process actually for doing it on The Walking Dead. We had a Xerox machine in the office, and I would just print off black on paper and fold it all up, and then use an eraser to take away some of the raised areas. And then when you scan it back in, it's like an inverted
Mm.
stamp of paper folds. So you would have a black
Mm-hmm.
canvas with white ridges from the paper folds.
Yeah.
And then I would create Photoshop
That's
brushes with
pretty
that and
cool.
put it in and make textures with that method. So like I was incorporating a lot of like analog steps into my work
Mm-hmm.
because I was still thinking primarily like visual artist coming out of college. I think you had to rely on traditional
Mm-hmm.
processes to do your work. And it's probably why a lot of the UI of that generation of the early aughts looked like very handmade,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the digital tools weren't available yet. So the artists were using traditional methods to do it. Like I remember the first few fonts I ever made, every character was drawn by hand.
Wow.
You know?
That's amazing. So in your career, you've gone from UI artist to lead. Yeah.
I think in a lot of cases, to be a successful lead,
Mm-hmm.
have to have done all of the steps before, because all the people you're managing are responsible for their individual contributions. And if they need help, you have to be able to step in and do that work with them.
Mm-hmm.
So you pretty much have to have developed an experience across UI in all of the different areas, let's say.
That's a
You
good
know,
point.
earlier when you're kind of like a junior UI person, you might be dedicated to doing a lot of icon work
Mm-hmm.
or an individual assignment, let's say. And as a lead, you have to be comfortable stepping in and help work on the icons in that
Mm-hmm.
individual assignment if they need help.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say another one of your people needs help with their implementation work using the tools that you have. You have to be ready to roll up your sleeves and get in there with the tool and help them solve any issues they have. So you pretty much have to be comfortable in all the different areas of UI. And then
Mm-hmm.
once you're nailed that, you can move on to being the lead, and you can start looking at how to plan out a project, how to scope UIs effectively, you know, how to budget,
Mm.
staff, other aspects of building UIs that you don't get to experience when you're at a junior or senior level.
Mm-hmm. What part of leading UX and UI is your favorite part?
You meet incredible people in the game industry, and you work with such talented, smart people, and people with educations you wouldn't believe, you know. And when you get to work with these individuals every day, you learn so much, and it's
Mm-hmm.
incredibly inspiring. And to build a UI for a game that you're passionate about, but have it be staffed with all these individuals that you get to interact with every day, it's kind of amazing, you know? It's the best party to be at, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has the same sort of motivation and drive, and it's a great collaboration. Uh, yeah, it's a really cool experience.
Very cool. Um, can we go into some of your work on your website?
Hmm.
All
Hmm.
right. Let's see. Let's see your badass website. Can we go into your X Defiant work?
Yeah, totally.
Let's talk about it. It's so cool.
Yeah,
From
so X
the
Defiant, I worked on this for the past 3 years with Ubisoft, and it's a first-person shooter, very much in the same similar vein as Call of Duty, except it's kind of more sporty, less
mm-hmm.
militaristic, we could say.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's got like a fun,
You had a
bold,
lot
clean
of
art
cool,
style, which I
yeah.
loved.
You had a lot of cool art to work with. That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. All those background assets you see came from marketing, but
Mm-hmm.
we designed the UI all around this idea that there's going to be like full screen billboards in the background, so tons of content piping in.
Mm-hmm.
That's our battle pass right there. These are our challenge screens.
Mm-hmm.
So a big part of this game is that it's sort of like a multiverse thing where all of Ubisoft's characters from across their worlds join together and fight in one universe.
Mm-hmm.
So here, you know, there's Highwayman from Far Cry. We've got the Assassins from Assassin's Creed.
What?
There's Rainbow Six, Splinter Cell.
Yeah.
So lots of cool Ubisoft brands coming together. And so part of the challenge of doing this game is you have to come up with an art style that represents all of the brands
Mm-hmm. Uh,
appropriately. Well, you create a UI style guide,
mm-hmm.
and you ensure that all of your components, your UI components, have the same style applied to them across the board, and that when you build out your UI, you're using shared components everywhere. Then that way, it's easier to have a
Mm.
cohesive look of your UI across it all when it's scaled out really big for tons of
Mm-hmm.
screens. So actually, yeah, keep it here for a second on the
Mm-hmm.
pink one. Um, these are kind of fun because they show the seasonal theming that we applied to the UI.
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of a feature that I had a lot of passion for. Um, we wanted to come up with a workflow
Mm-hmm.
where it was easy to apply a seasonal theme across the whole UI without a lot of overhead. So we created some shader tools, and you can just plug in a couple of textures and some color values, and suddenly the whole UI takes on a new color theme
So,
and
for
background
example,
theme.
you have the spot colors, these kind of colors. Would
Hmm.
they is that would change across seasons and
Yep,
things like
exactly. So
and
that's
backgrounds?
season two
Mm-hmm.
for the Highwaymen. It had a pink theme,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of the UI, it is extensible this theming. So like every screen in the UI took on this new color
Mm.
code. So it was a very like powerful tool for us to roll out a new season
That
in the
sounds.
UI and have it be minimal work for the team, which was focused on all sorts of other features.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about like the working with like weapon icons and different sizes and scales?
So all that stuff is actually 3D,
Mm.
and it's generated in Engine. So outside of this 3D scene here, you have weapons in a room with a camera, and images are captured and piped over
Okay.
these components so that we never have to have a library of icons that need
Oh
to be
wow.
updated in any way. Yeah, so like
Wow.
back when we worked on Call of Duty, we had this issue with the icons
Mm-hmm.
because we tried to have 2D sprite versions of all the guns and
Mm-hmm.
attachments, and we had to rebuild the gun with the attachments all on it and put it in that component
Mm-hmm.
box. And that was such a kind of a painful way to do that. So I think the solution is to basically render the gun off scene with all the attachments on it, the same 3D model that you're using
Mm.
in your view,
Mm-hmm.
and just generate an icon on the fly. Then you never have to manage that library of assets.
That's awesome.
So
That
that's what
seems
we
like
did there.
a high kind of development, but then like the outcome is so much nicer.
You,
Takes a long time to
I
develop
would say that
something.
across the board
Mm-hmm.
in UI, you want to have as few 2D assets as possible because every time you introduce a new 2D asset, you have to maintain it if anything
Mm.
changes, like style or whatever. So this is just in an effort to reduce the overall footprint of UI in the
Mm-hmm.
game. Um,
That's great. And
so
it
all of
cut
those attachment
even the
icons right
attachments.
there,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, all those, it's all generated in a view outside of the
Mm-hmm.
scene here, typed in. Same with those mastery icons with all the
The skins.
different camos on
Yeah.
them. You can imagine all the different weapon types and then
Yeah.
weapons. You would have to maintain a library of hundreds of icons.
Yeah.
So this process basically cuts that whole step out. You never have to hire an artist to do all
Mm.
that work.
Mm-hmm.
You just
What
build
en
it in the
Yeah.
scene and then pipe it in.
What engine were you guys using for that?
So Ubisoft uses Snowdrop. So in this case, we used the same tools as they had for the Division 2. And for XDefiant, we built a mode off of the Division 2 and broke it off into its own game.
What were some of the limitations you noticed with their UI tools?
It's pretty good,
Pretty
actually.
good.
There's a lot of capabilities. The tools are all node-based, so if you're familiar
Hmm.
with Unreal, it's just like that.
Let's go into some other games. Let's
Yeah.
go into Cold War.
Cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is our game,
Yeah.
Mike. We did this together.
So alone in a basement.
So this is cool. We're looking at both of our work here.
Yeah.
You'll be able to pick out some of your
So
stuff. I already see some.
mine is most of the iconography. So these daily challenge icons and the 2XP.
You should click on it. Zoom it in
Oh,
full screen.
you
You can
can
click.
zoom in
Yeah,
on
there we
it.
go.
Oh.
But let's just start out by saying that on this screen, what I did
Mm-hmm.
was implement a lot of these components.
Mm-hmm.
So I in the Treyarch tools,
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's called Luigi. I use Luigi, the implementation tool, to build that daily challenges box
Mm.
and put those timers around your beautiful icons and the game modes. And then across the tab bar at the top, I did the season one banner.
I see.
So a lot of implementation here is what we're
Yeah.
looking at. But um, previous to this, I worked on Modern Warfare with Infinity Ward, and that we established that tab banner similar to for that game,
Yeah.
and it was all about having a emphasis on the background and not having too much heavy UI that
Mm-hmm.
obfuscates the background. So it's something that I've been working around for years at that point. So I kind of developed some best practices for all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some games like Cold War
Yeah.
have a UI art style that is more expressive of
Mm-hmm.
the period, right? You
Yeah.
know, Modern Warfare I think tries to be this clean modern UI to go with it as part of its style. I think players want added value to all of the UI
Mm.
in Call of Duty, but they might get frustrated with its clutter.
Mm-hmm.
But I think X Defiant would have gotten there eventually.
Mm.
You support a live service game, and then after a couple years, there's more and more things being added to the screens.
Yeah.
I guess what we're looking at here is the Battle Pass.
Mm-hmm. I
I
see
did that at
you had
Treyarch
a
for
theme.
a while.
Yeah, you were theming it with the colors
Yeah,
and what other things like that would you recommend or could you talk about? Just coming into a screen like this, for example, and somebody saying, "Oh, it has add something that's unique to the battle pass." Um, I don't know what I'm asking.
yeah. Well, the Battle Pass has a big button on the left-hand side,
Yeah.
which is I refer to as the call to action. And in order to sell the Battle Pass, Activision wants to draw a lot of attention to that button. And so we budgeted for an artist to go in and make that button look really cool. And
Mm-hmm.
I was that artist. So my assignment was to make it look super cool and match the seasonal theme and be expressive with it. Like it's
Mm.
an icy button, so it animates. It's
Oops.
not shown there, but there was like a cool ice ripple animation on
Mm-hmm.
it, and those snowflakes are moving. So we put a lot of art into calling to action the Battle Pass purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's associated with the tab at the top, which carries the same art style.
So you've so far we've explored a lot of your UI in the FPS genre. Let's talk about
Mhm.
another one. Let's see. This is more of a RTS type game.
Yeah, War Commander Rogue Assault. It was an
Very cool.
iPad, iPhone RTS,
Mm-hmm.
um, kind of like turn-based RTS where you send your guys off to battle and then you log off and log in the next day and see how they did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this was fun. I don't have a lot of experiences doing like sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
UI, but
This
this
is
was like a
great.
really cool opportunity to try that.
Mm-hmm. And how did you create these?
In Photoshop.
Photoshop.
Yep. So
Wow.
we the game was built in Unity, so I would work in Photoshop to create my textures and then
Mm-hmm.
plug them into Unity, build it all that way. So these captures are like Unity renders.
It's funny when you see these, it's like you don't see the work that kind of drew to this final form. Can you talk about that? Like this, for example, like how much work, what went into creating these?
Yeah, pull it up a little bit.
Let's see.
Yeah, so I should mention other artists on the team,
Mm-hmm.
but Clay Shanks is a really talented UI artist that I worked with on this. So him and I collaborated on these. We provided a lot of the font choices and some of those shapes that we used. And then I took it and skewed it and turned it into like a 3D representation. So I used his UI style guide components that he established,
Mm.
and then created my own art based off of those style guide choices. So that's a typical interaction that you're going to have on a team. you might get onto a team and the style is already established.
Mm-hmm.
So you create art that works within that which has been built already. So a lot of these
Mm.
references uh, exist in the other parts of the game. So I was building something that would fit in. So those are all like different versions of attack buttons that you might see on the map.
Very cool. Dude, I love it. I love it. What
Thanks,
is
man.
this? Dawn Gate.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
Ooh.
Um,
This is interesting.
Take a guess. What type of game do you think this is?
This looks like a Warhammer. Not Warhammer. Uh, what do they call it? Warcrafty type game. Or a League of Legends type
Okay.
game.
Ooh,
I think a
oh,
League
League
of
of Legends. It looks like
Legends.
that. Okay. Well, you're hitting it right in the head. It's a MOBA.
Hmm.
So I was working with EA at the time, and we had a small studio called Waystone Games underneath EA, and we were making a MOBA. And so this is EA trying to make League of Legends, basically.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
hmm
And
So a
did it come
lot of
out?
hand painted UI. Did reach the public. It was in like an open beta
Hmm.
for a year, but it didn't survive.
Oh,
And
man.
there was a little bit of corporate leadership change at the company, and I think there was just not a desire to invest in
Hmm.
MOBAs
Hmm.
at the time. But it was a cool game and it was really
It
fun.
looks interesting.
And for me, it was like a huge learning experience. Like when I worked on this game back in 2012, it was the first time that I really was expected to do UX design as part of my job.
Hmm.
And a lot of those concepts were pretty new to me. And so it was a big learning experience. Yeah, so when you make UI with this type of art style, it can be a lot of work because there's a lot of handmade textures and um, you really want to have your style locked in before you commit to building this type of UI because
Hmm.
small changes add up to be a lot when they're all hand painted Photoshop textures.
Yeah. So, for example, this screen here with the upgrade tree and all that, that was something that was designed by a game designer, and then you had to interpret it into actual gameplay.
Yeah, so I worked with a systems designer and they had a brief, like a
Hmm.
written brief document, and I had to create a UX wireframe for the store explaining how it would work. And then once we had the UX approved, I would build it all in Flash and scale form. That's what we
Oh,
used to do
wow.
this. Build it all in Flash and scale form to the point where it functioned. So I'd worked with UI engineers. And then once we had it functioning and we play tested with it and we found that it worked without changes, or we would do the changes. But once we approved
Yeah.
that step, then I would go and do a UI art pass on this and try to make it look
Hmm.
all nice and
That's
arted
cool.
up. And then I would do the final pass on what I had previously implemented, where I would be plugging in textures and making it look great.
Wow.
So a lot of steps.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
games that you work on nowadays, UX, UI art, and even implementation are three separate roles.
Mm-hmm.
But at this time in 2012, I did all three steps, so
Wow.
it was a huge learning experience. But at the same time, it's great. You know, like I grew as a UX designer, I grew with my implementation skills, my art skills.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I feel like that's a good rule for anybody in that position. Like, learn everything you can, do get into everything.
mhm. Especially when you're younger, you want to cast a wide net and get a lot of experiences rather than just be ultra focused on a single thing. Just so
Mm-hmm.
you're well rounded, you get to learn some things about what you like and don't like.
You have a lot of variety in your work, so I think that's really great. I feel like a lot of
Yeah, you
some
never.
companies out there, they want somebody very specific, like, oh, you don't fit this style or this. But as an
Mm,
artist, I feel like I could do any style if you want, So it's that talking
yeah,
point is always kind of, I look at it as somebody, if somebody's asking me that, they probably don't know what they're talking about. Um, so
and it's
yeah.
easy to sort of get shoehorned into only doing one style if you work
Mm-hmm.
for the same company for many years and they only want to do the same type of game. Like that might happen. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately for me, I've jumped around a lot between different games and studios,
Yeah.
and so I've accumulated a lot of different aesthetics in my portfolio. I never get hung up on what the UI art style is going to
Mm.
be because I'm pretty confident that
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're after, I'm going to be able to do. I typically will go to games that I really want to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so the games that I really want to play have all sorts of different UI art styles. And so if I just start my search in a way that's like, do I want to play that game? Yes or no? Then
Mm-hmm.
I'll work for that team and do that UI. And then whatever art style they need, I'll figure it out.
Very cool. So what is in the future for you? What would you like to do? What's the the dream game that you would like to work on, or the dream project?
Well, I've been in UI leadership for um, like 3 years now, and I might continue on with that, but I also might be open to some consulting work or just contract-based UI work. I can pretty much handle any aspect of the workflow, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of options there.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you have any final thoughts for our awesome viewers? Hopefully. This is.
Final
I'm
thoughts.
always really awkward
Maybe
on this podcast because I'm just talking to my friends and I don't know what to ask. But um,
I think we should talk about like breaking into the industry.
okay.
We haven't really covered it, but like I get people hit me up on LinkedIn all the time,
Mm-hmm.
asking me the same type of questions over and over, which is like, how do I break into this
Mm.
industry? I'm applying for jobs, like I'm not hearing back from anybody. Like, how do I get some traction?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's a lot to talk about there.
For my personal experience, uh, I always wanted to work in games, and I always tried, and I always went into interviews and always sent my things over to game industry, to game companies back when I was younger. And even though I did not get those jobs, I did end up working for like web design or some kind of interactive thing where those skills are the same.
Mhm.
So instead of thinking I need to work in this industry specifically, there are in other industries where they're using the same skill set. So that sort of
Mhm.
helped me jump into games where I was working web design and multimedia stuff. That totally helped me get my foot in the door with a game company because they saw, oh yeah, he's using the same tools. As long as you have that, then I think you can apply as soon as you want to a game company. You don't
Mhm.
have to feel like, oh, I don't have enough work, or I don't have enough experience in there.
Totally,
um,
totally. Developing your skills is like the number one thing. Um, that I was trying to get into the film industry when I
mm,
started in games, and I was using 3D Studio Max and Maya. I was doing a lot of animation work, and I found that it was the same tool set in games, so it was really easy for me to jump over to that industry because I
mm-hmm,
had that knowledge of how to use that software, and so there wasn't a huge like learning curve for me to get ready with the tools. That definitely helped me.
mm-hmm. I remember being like 18, and I had just finished taking some Photoshop classes, so I had a couple little pieces, and I found a Microprose back then in Hunt Valley, Maryland, and I just randomly looked in the back. I swear to God, I looked in the back of the box of the game of XCOM. I had XCOM, and I looked in the back of the
Sweet.
box. It had the number. I called them up, and I was just like, "Hey, are you guys looking for anyone, interns or whatever?" And
Wow. You called the number on the
I
back of the
called the
XCOM box.
number, and I actually got it to go over there, and I took they gave me a tour of the studio. But even though I didn't
No
get the
way.
job, it was really fun,
Wow.
really a fun experience.
That's actually amazing that they called you back. I don't know if that would happen nowadays.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
Yeah, that's how it was done back then. There was no internet or
That's so
anything.
cool. How inspiring though. Young
Yeah.
Michael was probably like ready to work in games after that.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason they had like I wasn't able to buy games when I was at that age, for a PC. So the most of the
Mm.
games I could get are demo discs from like no, like the game store at the mall. So I remember like they would have stacks of them, of the demo
Mm-hmm.
discs. So I would just
Right
grab
next to the
random
AOL.
next to the AOL, next to the magazines, all that stuff. I would just grab random ones that I thought could even
Yeah,
run on
me
my
too.
computer, because back then you couldn't even run everything. You'd have to have like a special PC for every game or something. And
Yeah. I was a
that's how I
big
got
fan of the
into it.
demo disc as well. Like PC Gamer magazine had the
Yeah.
CD-ROM with all the demos.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't like browse the internet and get all these demos. You had to get it on a CD.
Yeah. And that's also like a way people started in that industry, is creating those CDs, because they were all
Uh-huh.
interactive. They all had menus. They all had
For
like,
sure.
those were the original
I was
websites, I think.
for
You know,
sure shovelware. It's called shovelware.
shovelware, yeah.
I was a huge consumer of shovelware in the 90s. I think it got me my start too.
Very cool. So what's your favorite UI in a game? Any game that's been out
Oh
ever?
man, favorite UI? Well, yeah.
UI that
Lately I've
usually UI that doesn't stand out is good. It's something that you're just kind of using, but what's a UI that really like made you go, "Ooh, that's kind of cool"?
well,
I
I'm
don't know.
I'm a big fan of, you know, minimalism,
Mm.
and I love this game Control by Remedy,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and they've got the most perfect minimalistic UI art style going on. Minimal in every way.
Mm-hmm.
There's like barely any strokes around buttons. Like there's free floating fonts and it's minimal subdued color palette, but it's just the most elegant,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, simplistic looking design. And it communicates everything it needs to and nothing else, which is awesome. You
Yeah.
know, the brand is represented, it's easy to use and understand the UI, but like nothing is obscured. It completely maintains the ghostly atmosphere of the game, and they just did such a great job with it. And yeah, I love that UI for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's the type of thing that I think about wanting to make. It would be a really good, yeah.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
like
I would
that
love
one
to.
too.
I would love to work on a game like that.
It seems like that game had a very clear direction. They knew exactly
Yeah.
what they wanted to do. So, as a last word, do you have any other anything else to say, or any advice for anyone, or just anything about life?
Yeah. As somebody that's, also searching for a job always in this industry, I would say that, don't get your hopes up trying to apply for jobs at all the big studios. If you have a chance to work for a really small company, they would probably love somebody that, has your skill set. And yeah, don't get distressed and get your hopes up if you get no's from all the big players. Start small, work your way into the industry, and you'll work your way up. Might take a while, but
Mm-hmm.
just you gotta find your in somewhere.
Very cool. All right. Thank you, Nat, for joining me. Uh, as always, it was lovely talking to you and catching up. And I wish you luck in the future, and I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks a lot.
All right. See ya. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep creating, keep learning, and remember, nothing is ever final, not even the Final Dot Final podcast.